Hello, my name is Kyle Brandenberger, and I am a professor of exercise physiology at Georgia State University. So, a little bit about my background. I was a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point in 2004. I spent 5 years on active duty as an infantry officer and then went straight into grad school. So, I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about human performance and what exactly it is that working out does to improve human performance. So, essentially, when you're working out, you're moving your muscles, you're activating them through the nerves, and this is doing a number of things within the muscle that are going to cause the muscle and the nerves and the central nervous system and other parts of the body to adapt to what you're doing. So, in physiology, we often refer to these genetic pathways. So, a genetic pathway is something happens inside the muscle that sends a signal to either turn up the production of proteins or to lower the production of proteins. So there's a number of processes within the cell that can trigger this sort of these genetic pathways. So the first kind of most important set of pathways are triggered by the release of calcium in the muscle. So calcium, what it does inside the muscle is it's like the kind of the key thing that gets released that causes the muscle to actually contract. So you have all these like little motors, sort of, you could think of them as motors inside the muscle, that when calcium binds to them, it causes them to turn on. And that is kind of a key signal in numerous genetic pathways. One, we have a pathway that causes the muscle to increase in size, also known as hypertrophy. The other thing that can happen, though, is if you have an exercise session that is long enough, 1 to 2 hours or 30 minutes to 2 hours, somewhere in that time frame, you can activate a second pathway that will cause that muscle to begin to become much more fatigue resistant, and shift towards a fiber that is going to be much more useful in an aerobic endurance sort of exercise. So another pathway or another signal is just the usage of energy. So when we use energy, when we burn sugar or fats, that is going to end up making our muscles more efficient at burning those types of energy sources. And it'll also lead to the storage of more of those types of energy. Another thing that can happen is we can have some shifts in pH or the acidity within the muscle. So as you work out a lot, you'll generate hydrogen, which is sort of like acid within the muscle, and that hydrogen can build up and it can be a potent stimulator of different genetic pathways. If you've ever watched Pumping Iron, you remember Arnold Schwarzenegger? He's like, oh, the greatest feeling that you can have in the gym is the pump, and you feel the blood rushing to your muscle. It feels fantastic, So that pump, that is really you have nerves that will sense that buildup of acidic environment within the muscle. That's what you feel as the pump. So that's a pH change. You could have just mechanical stress on the muscle. So there are proteins in the muscle that will actually sense when they're building up force. And so when you put a lot of stress on that muscle, it can stimulate the growth of muscle. And then we have heat stress. So heat stress, we typically think of this more as like a whole body kind of thing, where when you exercise, you're burning energy. And so just like when you have a car and you burn fuel, what happens? What generates heat, right? Same thing with your muscles. So you're burning ATP, you're burning carbohydrates, different energy substrates in there, and that's going to release some heat. So our bodies are not designed to operate outside of a certain temperature range. So we have to get rid of that heat. So the way we do that typically is we circulate blood through those areas, and the blood picks up the heat, and then we increase blood flow to the skin, and we sweat, which cools off the skin, and the blood moves through that skin, and it begins to cool off because of that temperature gradient. So these are all sorts of genetic pathways that can lead to increased exercise performance. So some other things, I think we already briefly just discussed this, but also burning energy and fat. So one of the ways that you can improve your performance, especially in running, is just the burning of energy. So all of us have stored fat on our bodies, and so that fat, it doesn't really contribute to our running performance, right? That fat isn't like contracting to help us run. It's just kind of sitting there and jiggling and making it where we have to produce more energy to move the same amount of distance or the same speed. So it's beneficial to burn through some of that fat while we're exercising. Improves our body composition. We end up not having that basically dead weight on us when we're out running. Another adaptation that happens is the increase in blood volume. So as you exercise, particularly aerobic types of exercise, and if you're doing in the heat even more, your blood volume will actually expand, meaning you got more blood inside you. That is going to help increase the amount of blood that your heart can pump, so your heart will adapt. Your blood vessels will become more numerous. You'll just become more efficient at moving blood to the working muscles. And because you can move more blood to the muscles, that means you can transport more oxygen to the muscles. Another thing that can happen is, the increase in the heart's ability to pump blood. So the more aerobic exercise you do, the more efficient your heart will get at pumping blood. And so what that translates to, as your heart can pump more blood with each contraction, it means that you'll lower your heart rate for a given speed of running. So if you exercise in the heat, another thing that will happen is you'll increase your sweating rate, and you'll actually change the composition of the sweat that you excrete. It will become less salty, it will evaporate sooner, which will help you cool off more efficiently. So if you've ever been in a PT run and you've seen a guy out there running, it's like, wow, that guy's not even sweating. Well, he is sweating when it's hot out. It's just that he's more efficient, so more of that sweat is evaporating until you reach a certain level of intensity, in which case he'll begin to build up sweat on his face or body. Okay, so what is the point in knowing all of this? Well, so if you're a person who is struggling with your run, how can you apply this? The first thing is there are kind of two different schools of thought on how you improve running performance. And so the first is you should exercise as intensely as possible. You should run as fast as you can, and do lots and lots of interval training. As hard as you can. The faster you run in your training, the faster you're going to run when you have that graded event, that APFT. So why? Okay, let me describe the other training philosophy, which is to just do lots of long, slow distance running. So I want to be honest that neither of these philosophies is really ideal. So if you do lots of really high intensity exercise, you will create some muscle adaptations. Primarily, what you're going to be doing is training your heart to pump more blood. You're going to be doing what's called VO2 work, where you're increasing the maximum pumping capacity of the heart. What you'll miss out on if you do these kind of like short, really intense workouts like CrossFit or something like that, you won't activate those pathways that make your muscles much more efficient at burning or using oxygen. So that means when, let's say you're this person who goes out and you do your 10-minute workout every day and you go as hard as you can and you're like, I'm really strong, right? So then you go out and you do your 2-mile run, and what happens? You start running and you're like, oh my God, my muscles, they just feel like they're burning, they're heavy, it's hard to breathe, because your muscles are not, didn't activate that kind of like long-term pathway. So remember, there's the short-term and the long-term pathway. So this takes 30 minutes to 2 hours to activate. So you don't really get those maximal adaptations at the muscle level. So that's going to end up, you're going to burn out real fast. If you do lots and lots of long, slow distance running, you will get those adaptations. You'll probably actually run faster than the person who just does the 10-minute extreme workout, CrossFit workout every day. But you're going to be missing that really high cardiac output that's really going to drive really fast running times. So how do we kind of reconcile these two training philosophies? Well, what you want to do is you want to start off 3 to 4 weeks of running at long, slow distance. Train those peripheral muscles to use the oxygen, okay? And then you start to throw in 1 day a week, up to maybe 2 or 3 days a week. After that first month, you're going to have these shorter, more intense workouts. Now, how many of these shorter, intense workouts should you do? Well, I like to limit it to 1 day a week. That seems to work for me. I can get up to running a 5-15 mile pretty quickly within a couple weeks of starting to incorporate speed work into things. Now, I'm genetically gifted. Might be a lot more time for you. But what I've found is if I do more than 1 day of really intense speed work, I tend to get injured. So a lot of you guys and gals out there, you probably notice that you may get injured quite often. You're rolling your ankles, you're doing having calf strains and muscle pains and different things. I'm going to go more into muscle injuries and injuries in a later episode, but if you do too much intense work, you're more likely to get injured when you're doing that really intense workout. So if you limit it to 1, maybe 2 days max a week, you'll cut down on your injury rates. Okay, so I would love to hear what your comments are on this video. In the next episodes, I'm going to discuss some kind of like home treatment methods of injuries, look at what causes injury, ways that you can reduce your risk for injury, and try to give you the tools to help you continue to work out. Because the biggest thing that is going to improve your athletic performance as a soldier is consistency. So if you have to keep taking off, oh, I got to take a week off because I'm having this crazy pain in my leg or something, that is really going to hamper your long-term performance. If you can continue to work out, 5-6 days a week, every week of the year, you're going to be a lot better off than somebody who works out really, really hard for 2 weeks and then, I'm injured, I got to take a week off. So that kind of continuous, sustainable